Okay, we're in business.
We are in business. Very good. So today what I'm going to be talking, or maybe just to quickly reintroduce myself. I know I did a bit of an introduction for some of you guys earlier, but my name is Maurizio Gioffre. I'm, I guess, the lead headhunter at a company called Montreal Associates. You may not have heard of us before. We're actually a UK-based company. Most notably, just the quick highlights, we're a recruitment partner of Salesforce's professional services team. So, for example, Salesforce, as you know, runs a lot of different projects. They have a professional services team that, in essence, operates very similar to a consultancy. When they need contract people, they come to us and we help them find those people. But in addition to that, what's pretty cool, I think, is we've been able to place people from really all different parts of the world on different projects, whether it's remote, whether it's actually relocating somebody. I know, Todd, you were saying, hey, I'm looking to get into some more remote work. The more I think you can build a brand around yourself as far as what you're doing, what's special about you, the more you can open up opportunity for yourself in the world as it is today, not just limiting yourself to say what's in Ottawa for you, what's in Ontario for you, what's in Canada for you, what's in North America. But there's a lot out there, and there's a lot more flexibility that companies offer now. For people to work from anywhere. Like, prime example, I had a candidate from Germany, was spending some time with his wife in South Africa, who was contracting for a project for Salesforce in Los Angeles. Month-long project, quick thing as he does his work. So really anything is possible when it comes to this sort of stuff. And what I'm going to be talking about today is just how you can sort of reassess what your online brand presence looks predominantly on LinkedIn, how you can leverage that to open up more opportunity for yourself. So even Nash was saying, at one point in the early 2000s, when there was a bit of a recession, it became hard for people to find jobs, or some people lost their jobs. Anything can happen at any point, as we've learned with COVID and stuff as well. So the more you can get a handle on this, the more I think you start creating a rhythm for yourself to start creating some content online, building more of an online brand, the more opportunity you can open for yourself, the more seamless the job search will be, because let's face it, nobody likes really looking for a job, right? So that's what we'll get into today. I'll try and bang through this stuff as relatively quickly as I can, because I would love to take as many questions, comments as you guys have, and we can have just a conversation about what you think. But I
have a question to start.
Please.
I'm doing this on purpose, by the way.
No worries.
I wanted to get the idea that people should ask questions and interrupt. So why is your company called Montreal Associates? It's
really good question. And it's honestly not as great of a story as you probably hope. The owner of the company, he's an older British man, very nice guy. Way back, probably in I want to say the 70s, visited Montreal, loved the city so much, was enchanted by it, that he's like, you know what, when I start my own company, I'm going to name it after this city. And that's why it's called Montreal Associates. So not really anything incredibly impressive as to why, but that's that.
Okay, so you aren't actually, when I saw that name, I assumed you're focused on hiring and sourcing people who are bilingual, could speak French, and would be focused on the Quebec market.
That's something, I mean, hey, we do have business there, and it's great when people are bilingual, because there's an incredible shortage, I would say, of French speakers, particularly in the Salesforce space. We run into that with government stuff quite a bit. I'm sure Chris has run into that himself before, finding bilingual, solution engineers. But I mean, yeah, if you're bilingual, we can get into that. I was going to talk about that in a little bit too. Absolutely opens a ton of doors for you, not just here, also on projects based in France, right, where they're open to having people work remote. So yeah, it's huge. Good point, Todd.
And when you were talking about remote opportunities, I basically looked at time zone as my now criteria, not Ontario, exactly. Not Canada, just within an hour or two difference of the current time zone I'm in. That exactly. Would be where I lean.
And that's the thing too, right? Like, if some companies be like, look, we really can't flex on time zone here. They have to be local, and it's not going to work. But other times they're like, you know what? It might actually be nice having somebody who's a separate time zone from us completely. While we're sleeping, they're working. We collaborate kind of in the middle somewhere. So there's always flexibility, but you got to ask those questions, right? Like, me as the broker between the two, there's a solution that can always be found if somebody's really good at what they do. That's really the hard part. Once you do this, the rest of it is something that's a discussion that has to be talked about, right? But the whole idea for building this personal brand online, now, in-person events are obviously awesome, but as we found, with everything that's going on, it's not always possible to attend, tons of in-person events, as many of us probably did before. The idea isn't to be this million follower, LinkedIn influencer. You're posting all day, 3, 4, 5 times a day. that's all you're doing, you're completely it's not the idea, right? You don't have to get to that level to get a return on what you're doing with your brand on LinkedIn. All you need when you think about it, right? Especially if you want to maybe move away from a permanent job and go contracting, or if you just want to open up some potential opportunities for yourself in the coming months. If you look at how many people maybe in even starting with your relative area might be hiring for your skill set, start with that. Get on their radar, right? That's where you really want to begin. So the first thing to consider is like, why is your brand important? And that's ultimately why. It can be a door opener to having more conversations that will open up more opportunity for you without you simply clicking the apply button and potentially getting the standard rejection email that many of us get when we apply for a reason we may not even know. Defining who you are and who you want the rest of the world to see is important because there's value on both sides of that spectrum. If you're brand new to Salesforce, you're just starting on Trailhead, believe me, you may think, wow, like I don't know too much, I'm still learning. There's tons of value there. There's positions where like someone like you would be perfect. If you've been in this space for, I don't care, 100 years, doesn't matter. There's a ton of value for somebody who has all that experience. But you have to find out ways for people to view that in the right context so that they see the value from it. We're going to talk about that. Defining who your audience is going to be is also a little bit important because like, depending on what you want out of this, you may be gainfully employed. You're like, you know what? I don't really need to open up job opportunities for myself right now, but it'd be nice just to start having conversations with people who do what I do, get some new ideas, gain some new perspective, find out or just decide for yourself who you want that initial audience to be. And we're going to talk about how you start maybe connecting with those people and building a little bit of a community for yourself. And the biggest thing is if we're talking about building an online brand, a big piece of that is creating your own unique content, not necessarily just liking or sharing other people's stuff, which is definitely good if you do it in the right way, but considering how you can do this yourself and how you stay consistent with that. We're going to talk about it. The next thing I want to talk about before we get to a bit more of an actual plan or of an actionable plan is the value of being specialized. So there's different opinions on this. You know, some people prefer like, hey, I'm happy being more of a generalist and they're doing really well. Excellent. I just want to point something out here because we do get a lot of requests globally for people who are specialized in different areas. And oftentimes within Salesforce, it has to do with industry more so often than platform. Platform specialty is important, but they change very quickly, whereas industry problems don't change as quickly, right? Which is why there's a bit more of a stronger, I would say, compound interest that you may have if you come from an industry background. So what we want to start with is if, for example, you're starting out in the space and you're thinking, hey, what should I specialize in? Maybe one area is more lucrative than the other. You've read this, you know, this industry might pay more than this one. I wouldn't even go that far to look at this, especially with Salesforce. There's lots of projects to go around. Everyone in the space gets paid relatively well. You want to think if you're going to specialize in industry per se or a platform, we can look at it either way. You want to think like where your interests lie. Like what would you, if you weren't getting paid, like read about at night, for example, if you were to pick an industry, you're going to pick an area of Salesforce. That's typically like the smartest way for a person to choose what they want to specialize in because you have a passion inside for it. And it's just going to be easier for you to keep learning about it. The one thing, if you become a specialist is like, it's like anything else in tech, you always got to keep learning. But if you're really going to brand yourself as someone who knows everything about this space, not everything, but you know what I mean, you want to make sure that you enjoy what you're doing or you're just going to end up burning out, right? So consider that if you are thinking about it. For those of you who maybe have been in the space for a while, maybe you've been touching a few different things and you're considering, hey, I don't necessarily love any of these different areas, but I would like to pick one to specialize in. Some hot areas right now that we're seeing a lot of requests for: energy and utilities, communications, insurance. Those are three areas. I mean, government as well, we can talk about that too, more respective to the country that you're in, of course, because each government operates differently. Public sector is also a big area, but those are our industries we've picked out for someone who maybe doesn't have a specific interest in any areas, just because those industries typically are very like old school in the way that they operate their technology. And because of that, and because of like the climate of overall business as it is right now, there's a lot of pressure for them to change. And these companies typically have pretty good amount of money in their pocket to do that. They often just need the right people to sort of help guide them. So if you want to be in a place where, I don't want to use the word like recession proof, but typically a lot of the people that we've had in these areas, even though things probably slowed down over the past couple of years, they were still working. There was still opportunity for them. And yeah, just something to consider. If you've worked in these areas, you're considering maybe I could specialize in one area than the other. Something to think about. Really, last comment on specializing, whether on a tech product or in an industry. There are people who are successful in both. You'll have tech agnostic Salesforce CPQ specialists who've touched different industries, right? As an example, I'm just using CPQ as an example because again, there's a lot of opportunity around that specific tool right now. Those people are doing quite well. Then you have people who have touched, say, over the past maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 years, a couple different technologies. Maybe they went from Oracle into Salesforce, and now they're working, say, on Salesforce Industries, their product in one of these given industries. But they've seen the changes in those industries over that amount of time. That compound interest has a lot of value when speaking to a client, even if there's someone who maybe could learn that industry relatively quickly. To learn a platform and to learn an industry, it's quite different. You can learn a platform in a relatively short amount of time as a comparison to learning an industry and being an industry specialist in the same amount of time, if that makes sense to you guys. It takes you have to go through a lot of different gauntlets to really understand the way executives in the given industry think, especially one as complex as, say, telecommunications or insurance. There's politics within that. There's how the company views their customers, how they want to view their customers. It can be learned, but there is a lot of value for someone who has that experience already, even if you don't come from the Salesforce space yet. If you can bridge that connection to a past life within a given industry, it could be a good entry point for you. So this is just something to think about when you're thinking to yourself, what do I bring to the market? Maybe if it's not Salesforce skills right away, I'm still learning it, but I have these other skills from a previous life, and I think that could set me up well to be seen as an industry specialist, for example. So my last slide here is how you.
But you haven't shared by the way, you haven't shared your slides.
Can you guys not see?
Yeah, we can see slides, Kevin.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I guess I'm the one that's.
Wow, that would have been incredibly embarrassing.
Okay.
But everyone can see these slides, right?
Click on Zoom button, Kevin.
Okay. Perfect. So this is just like a few steps that you can follow. Let's say you're like, okay, cool. Sounds pretty good. I want to start doing this for myself. I want to build a bit of a personal brand for myself. But I want to start now. And all, fluff aside, how do I begin actionably to do this? And starting goes back to what we said. What will the ecosystem find valuable about me, right? Whether you're just starting out, maybe if you have experience in a different life, cool. And you're just starting to learn Salesforce, that's even better. But let's say, like, worst case scenario, fresh out of school, no real experience, you're just starting on Trailhead, right? That there is value there that you can show to the rest of the ecosystem, right? But the thing is, if you're not showing the rest of the ecosystem or the people that you're connecting with, the struggles that you're going through, the challenges that you're overcoming, what you're learning through that journey, say on Trailhead, for example, because it's free, all that hard work you're doing, no one really knows about. They just see someone on LinkedIn who has maybe a couple super badges, for example, or a few badges attached to their profile. They don't know anything about what you're learning, about what you took from that, what excited you. There's a lot that you can show the rest of the ecosystem, even if you're somebody who, like I said, has no experience in the past. Let's say, for example, on the other side of things, you're someone who's always been able to find work quite easily. You've been in the, actually, Todd, if you want, ask your question before I go
Okay.
on.
I didn't know whether I should jump in verbally or
Please,
I can raise my hand. Okay.
No
So when you're saying what you're doing in the trails, learning that sort of stuff doesn't sound like it has a lot of value from what other people can see. I've kind of been focusing on that, assuming that if I get to a certain status, a certain level in there, that will help as part of marketing and showing that, yeah, he's got some skills, some knowledge. Is that incorrect that I'm not doing that the right way? Or is it just not as valuable as I thought it would be?
No. So, I mean, here's the thing, right? Like, project experience is obviously something that's very valuable because it's hard experience that an employer can see, okay, this person's delivered this, that looks great. When you don't have experience, right, there's a lot of opportunity out there that doesn't require someone to have actual project experience. But the one thing, remember, Trailhead is a free tool. And there's a lot of people who are working on Trailhead to get, go through their trails, get their super badges, eventually get their certifications. One thing that you can do to show that you're actually applying what you're learning, or you're at least thinking in your mind as far as like, what does this mean maybe for a business? That's where you want to maybe take it to the next level, where let's say you complete a badge, sharing on LinkedIn, like, hey, these are some struggles I had in this badge. This is where I overcame it. And you can do this in a variety of different methods, whether you want to write an article, whether you wanted to post a short video, whether you wanted to do a short post. You could even post a GIF, like a photo, for example, that maybe there's some humor in it. We'll talk about that in a minute, but there is definitely value in doing what you're doing on Trailhead on its own. You work through the trails, you get some certifications, you apply to some jobs, you're probably going to get some interviews. But this is just to show you something that, like, not everyone else is taking the time to do this. And it is more noticeable when somebody is, wow, putting that much time, not just to do the trails, but they're actually sharing with the rest of the ecosystem, like what they've learned, what they haven't learned. At the very least, you may end up with a mentor, someone who's like, hey, like, I actually really like that post. A couple of years ago, I was there too. I know what that struggle is like. I had the same problem when I did that. You know, did you try this? Maybe I can help you. It's a very like welcoming ecosystem, but if no one knows what you're going through, how do they know? Like, how do they know how to connect with you, how to bring value to you, right? So it's just something to consider as you go through those trails, right? Does that answer your question okay?
Okay,
Yes,
Maurizio,
that's good.
Just one clarification. When you talk
Sure.
about posts, blogs, posts, do something,
Yeah.
what you're referring to? Are you referring to LinkedIn as additional exposure to your Trailhead, and then you link these two to be in some ways connected? Are you referring to the Twitter? You want to chat in the Twitter, try to get some traction there? You know,
Yeah.
all this talk was not generalized with no instructions so far. What I'm asking for, what you
No,
see,
good point.
it's working here. Which channel we need to, or people need to
Good.
focus on?
Super good point. Number one, I would say like LinkedIn is a good place just because the people that you want to connect with for the most part are typically going to be found here. But if you love Twitter or you love a different platform, right, that you think might work for you, it's also fine to try out different ones. Like there's no real limit on like where you can post some of this stuff. I know some people who have really good success on Twitter. Personally, I don't have Twitter. Maybe I should consider it. Most of my content is put out on LinkedIn. And then I have a YouTube channel as well where I put a lot of the video content that links back to LinkedIn. But LinkedIn is a good place to start, I would say, just because this is ultimately where professionally everyone can be found, especially in Salesforce. But don't let that stop you from experimenting with other platforms. Absolutely not. There's no rules. If you want to start a website, you want to start blogging, go ahead and do that. I know an architect who just approached me and showed me his website that he wants to start doing that this week. I'm going to be doing a session with him later today, a video session that I'll post next week. But he's starting to post his own blog content, just in exactly what we said. He did a couple new certifications. He wrote about what he learned, what he struggled with, areas of help that like if somebody else were to take that certification after him, how they could maybe benefit from like what he found easy, what he found difficult. And that's just one idea, right? Like there's so many ways you can take this. This is just like, I'm trying to make it as simple as you can because not everyone right away is going to think of all these new creative ideas of how they can show what they're learning. But if you just dumb it down and think about, hey, like I worked on this today, and whether it's on Trailhead or in my job, and it was tough. It was a struggle. It was a challenge. There's nothing that's really more authentic than that, because like if you're genuinely challenged and you're genuinely learning, there's no lies there. You're not trying to make something fluffy. This is truth that you're going through in your day-to-day that likely a lot of other people in the ecosystem at some point, whether it's now, whether it's maybe in the future, or they've done it before, are probably going to go through something of a similar fashion. And that's what gets people to connect in, I would say, the most authentic ways. Like you're experiencing something that I experienced. We can probably help each other by sharing knowledge. And then from there, you never know, that person in a year might reach out to you for a job. They may end up getting, one of your kids a job at some point. Like there's so many different opportunities that could open by just genuinely learning how to like share what you've done so far, whatever that is, connect with people, and it goes where it goes. The last thing I wanted to say on, actually, I kind of touched on that for step one, whether you're at the beginning stage of your career, whether you're much more senior, you have a lot of experience, you can still share a lot of those struggles that you've had, probably at a higher level. And probably, to be honest, later on in your career, you're going to have more opportunities to do collaborations with other people, whether you may have worked with them, whether you haven't worked with them yet, but you share a lot of the same ideas. We do that a lot with like podcast sessions. I know I'm not like an architect myself, I'm not a developer myself, but people who we haven't even placed necessarily, who want to talk about topics that we're also passionate about. We get together 20 minutes, we have a discussion, we put it out there for other people to see. Some people find it interesting, some people maybe not, but it's a way for us to collaborate with each other, share ideas genuinely, put it out there, and see what comes of it. The second step is where you want to be a bit more direct with mapping out your companies of interest and potentially the contacts in those companies that you might want to talk to. So let's say you are potentially interested in opening up some job opportunities for yourself. Okay, maybe not right now, maybe in the future, maybe it is right now, whatever. You want to do some considerable research as to like, okay, just because this company's hiring someone like me, does it really mean that I would actually want to work at this company? You could send out applications all day, you might get an interview, you might get an offer. It doesn't necessarily mean that that company is going to be one that you're going to be happy at if you don't do your proper research. And if you come up with a short list of like even five companies where you're like, wow, if I could interview there, I'd be super, super happy for the opportunity. I'd love to meet them. I love what they're doing, whatever it is. Map out those companies, follow them on LinkedIn, and just look at who works there, right? You're probably going to be interacting, if you're going to interview, with some HR contacts, head of Salesforce, director of sales excellence. There's a ton of different people who would probably be, and if you need help identifying who those people would be, I mean, that's like my job, so I'm sure I could help any one of you do that. You want to start following these people at the very least. You don't even have to connect with them, you can just follow them. Some of them may be more active on LinkedIn than others, right? The ones that are, start paying attention to the things that they may post, things that they may comment on, right? You're going to start to understand a bit more of the culture of the company, potentially even like the culture of the leadership on the teams that you might be joining. And the more I think you sort of get in sync with that, you get on their radar. Maybe you start commenting on posts that they put out. Maybe you start liking some of their stuff, whatever it is. Eventually, if you're branding yourself correctly, you're probably going to get on their radar too. When it comes time for them to start looking for someone, you're not just going to be another person who's like picked out of the pile. They're going to recognize that name because of everything that you're doing from before. You're building a bit of a brand for yourself, but you're also actively putting yourself out there so people start seeing what you put out. Now, I'm not saying to like spend all day on LinkedIn because that's just like a wasteful use of time, I would say. But if you block your calendar, or I'd say, okay, 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes after work, I'm going to jump on LinkedIn, just going to go scroll through my feed. I'm going to like look at all the people that I'm following and see who's posting what. Okay, that's a pretty interesting
question for you.
Go ahead.
So LinkedIn has two versions. One's the free version, one's the version
Correct.
where, so is it worth spending the money on the, whatever the version that you have to pay for?
So I've always had the paid version because like in recruitment, it kind of comes stock with any job you have, but cool story. So I told you guys before, one of my brothers is likely going to be starting his first Salesforce job right out of school in a couple of weeks. My other brother, he's like the middle, you could say. He went to school for business, but he was always interested in like arts, animation, right? Never went to school for any of that. But every day he would work on his craft and he would kind of do this off to the side. He'd work some part-time jobs and he would start building up his portfolio of just his own thing of animation, right? In addition to some of like the in-person networking events he would go to, he did actually buy LinkedIn Premium and he used that to do exactly what we're talking about now, to the point where his first job in animation, no schooling in it at all. Like I said, business degree, self-made portfolio. His first job was at Snapchat, animating Bitmojis, if you know what those are. And he went on to work on different productions like Space Jam 2 and all these other things. But a lot of that started from his ability to not only leverage his in-person networking ability, going to networking sessions at the time as well before COVID, but through buying the premium version. I'm not trying to sell you LinkedIn at all. If you don't want to buy it, don't buy it. But from what he tells me and his experience and his ability to actually connect with people and utilize LinkedIn to its full ability, he's like, if I could go back, I wouldn't change a thing. I probably would have still bought premium. So something to consider. Thanks. For sure. Yeah, so what I was saying there is block your calendar however you want to block it, whether it's daily, whether it's once every few days, once a week, doesn't even matter, right? It's whatever you're comfortable with. And just think about, okay, maybe every Monday, the first Monday of every month, I'm going to block this time. I'm going to write an article. I'm going to create a post. I'm going to make a video, whatever you're comfortable with. And then, on Wednesdays, I'm going to block this time, 10 quick minutes, scroll through my feed. I'm going to try and post maybe an insightful comment on anything that I see that's interesting. And if something's not interesting, don't force it. It's not interesting. But if it is, try and write something thoughtful, a thoughtful comment, what you think about it, your opinion. These are ways that you can just consistently start getting yourself out there. People start seeing your name. It's not just like a, great job. You're actually posting something with a little bit of thought and value to it. And it's not overdone, because if you don't see anything that's interesting, you're not going to write anything. But you have a time and calendar where you're holding yourself accountable to at least achieve some level of consistency. So that's that for when it comes to actually keeping yourself accountable to be consistent. For me, putting time slots in calendar, I'm going to post this every Monday, Wednesday at this time, 10 minutes quickly after lunch. I'm going to go through my feed, whatever it is. You can utilize whatever channel you want, but blocking the calendar is helpful. And then when it comes time to outreach, how do you engage? If there was one answer to this and I had it, I'd probably be like a millionaire right now as someone who works in recruitment, right? If I could, anytime I reach out to someone, ensure that you get a response, but it's not always going to be like that. And you might have to be a bit creative and in how you may eventually want to take that approach. So let's say, for example, because this happens, I think, more often now than not, you're following a few different hiring managers, you're following a few different companies, you've learned a bit about kind of what those companies have been working on. Oftentimes, especially with big companies, they post a lot about this stuff in the news. You've been following them. Hiring manager comes out and they say they might be looking for somebody, right? Who might, for example, or they're looking for somebody who matches essentially the profile that you have, right? Hiring managers do this all the time. It's not just recruiters who post that. A lot of people in cases like this will write a decently long message. Hello, my name is this. Would be so interested to talk about the role that you posted, at this time and this day, looking for this type of person. I'm a very hard worker. Would love to talk. Please let me know. Stuff like that, I mean, sometimes can work, but there are better ways, I think, to go about it, where you can use a bit more creativity into how you approach that conversation. And I think I would say you don't always have to be super direct in what a lot of people would expect was that super long message, because you're just going to get caught up in that person's inbox of a bunch of messages that look the same. I would encourage you, and if you're not comfortable with it, you can take some time, but on the mobile version of LinkedIn, whether it's free or whether it's paid, there's different options as to how you can actually reach out to someone if they're a first level connection. That includes sending a voice note. If any of you use WhatsApp, you can actually send a voice note to somebody. You can send a video message to somebody where you actually have your face and you just say like a quick 30 seconds why you might be interested in having a conversation with that person. Considering stuff like this, as opposed to the standard, outreach message that a lot of people will send, when they're looking for a job, this really does stand out because not a lot of people are doing that. And I think it shows a bit more authenticity. It shows a bit more personality, even if it's just a quick 20 seconds. Hey, saw that job description that you put out on LinkedIn. Super exciting to me. I've been doing XYZ for the past couple of years. You're probably getting a lot of people reaching out to you for it, but if you're up to it, check out my LinkedIn profile. Would love to have an open chat with you. Quick 15 seconds. That short message, I can almost guarantee you would go a lot further than a long-winded written message that these hiring managers are likely getting. So yeah, I would consider that next time you're thinking about potentially reaching out to somebody who could be looking to hire people. But I threw a lot at you guys there. And I'd love to discuss, if we even have time, anything that's still on your guys' minds about any of this.
So you got around 5 minutes. Okay.
I'll take it.
I'm wondering how long before people are going to get inundated with voicemails and video mails that's just going to become another noise factor and caught in another clog of junk sort of thing.
Who knows? I don't think it's now. I don't think it'll be this year from what I can see so far. And the reason why I'm saying that is because every time I do it, I get responses that are like, whoa, I've never seen this before, but cool way to reach out. Like, let's have a chat. or at the very worst, it's like, thanks so much for reaching out in a creative way. Now is really not the time, but can we make a point to touch base in a couple months? So far, I don't see it, but will it end up going that way? 100%, like everything else, my friend. Once everybody jumps on it, it becomes old, right? And there's going to be something new or something different that you can use to approach.
I still feel the most effective way to make progress through a potential job is a referral, someone who the hiring manager knows and says,
100%.
hey, this guy is someone you should talk to. And then that becomes your in to talk to them.
100%. How do you generate referrals though, when you don't have a network? You're new to the ecosystem. You don't know anyone, but a referral would be awesome. And the thing is like, imagine if you could only get referred by people you've actually worked with. And as much as like that pool would be so small, when you do stuff like this, where we talked about collaborations before, there's someone else in the ecosystem, you never worked with them, but from what they're putting out there, from maybe the stuff that they're writing, video they're posting, you guys share some of the same ideas. You reach out to them however way you want, talk to them about, hey, like, really love what you're writing. I agree with this stuff I'm a bit, not sure about, would love to talk to you about it. You engage in that kind of conversation, you collaborate in some way. That person down the road, because you guys may have worked on a personal project together, building up whatever you guys decide to do, they could end up preferring you. Even if they say, I haven't worked with this person, but I've collaborated with them on some of the content we've done. They've shown some of their skills, at least maybe in a webinar that we did together. I'd love for you to meet them. That's enough just to open the door. Then you got to do the rest when you get in there. Mita, I see your hand up.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Okay.
Thanks for the presentation. I related to a lot that you were saying. So a few years ago, I attended the True North Dreaming conference in Ottawa.
Nice.
And they learned that I was a writer, well, not really a writer, but I like to write and I write a blog. And so in exchange for admission into the conference, I wrote a blog post about my experience.
Nice.
For the 3 days, and it was really well received, and I posted on LinkedIn, and it was kind of neat to do that, to try a different approach.
Nice.
So that was really good.
That's cool.
And then also I wanted to learn more about Salesforce, so I reached out to a lady I'd met at the conference who works in the nonprofit field, and asked if I can volunteer in any way. And she connected me to an organization in Ottawa called Ethiopia Aid that helps, women and girls in Ethiopia in different projects.
Very
so
nice.
yeah, so Kevin and I helped them for the last few months to develop some reports, and just learned a lot and made a lot of connections. So there's so many cool ways to connect in the Salesforce world. So my question is, have you seen a lot of opportunities in the nonprofit sector, and what kind of opportunities have you seen?
Personally, like for the requests that we get, not too much, but what I do know is that there is a pretty big market for it. I think geographically too, in some places, there's definitely more opportunities than others. I know if you want, actually, hit me on LinkedIn. I have a contact. He's actually based in Munich, Germany, and he's initially from Kenya, and he's really, really involved in a lot of different nonprofit stuff between Europe and also Africa. He's certified with Nonprofit Cloud, and that's an area that he wants to continue to specialize in. So I know he has a pretty tight pulse on the market. So if that's your thing and you're interested, please let me know. I'm happy to just connect you guys and another connection for you.
Okay, sure. Thanks.
Cool. No worries. Sandy.
Hey, great presentation.
Thank you.
I just wanted to bounce off of what Mita was saying. Mita, I've been in the nonprofit space here in Ottawa for
Nice.
9 years.
Nice.
So there is definitely opportunities here. If you ever want to connect and just chat it out, we can talk about it.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I was it was Julia who connected me to Ethiopia, and you referred me to her, right? It was you that initially.
I think
Yeah.
so.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's great. Thanks. I will.
2 years ago. Yeah. But yeah, feel free to reach out.
Okay.
Nice. Very nice.
Kevin, I was wondering if I could just take a minute or two just to kind of, dovetail as a hiring
Sure.
manager, my experiences with the presentation, right? So again, as I mentioned, I'm always looking for good candidates because finding good candidates, as mentioned, is very difficult. It's a very competitive market right now, especially for Salesforce-minded people. If you're bilingual, and then it's even tighter. And if you have any healthcare background, it's even tighter. So as a hiring manager, the network is really important. I love it when my network or my solution engineers on the team can refer somebody. That puts your application and your CV at the very top of the pile, right? But I rely heavily on LinkedIn. So I will sit down on a Sunday morning, I'll open up LinkedIn and I'm like, okay, where do I need somebody, right? So I'll type into the search Salesforce, and then I'd filter by geographic area. So like Ottawa or greater metropolitan Ottawa, I think is another option. And that's it. So I leave it kind of really wide open. And I'm probably going to get, like in Ottawa alone, I mean, I'm going to get 1,000 hits, right? And then I basically just start going through and I really quickly say, okay, do you have a photo, right? I'm not sure why people don't put photos up there, but in my role as a solution engineer, we're customer facing. So I want people who are very comfortable, being in front of people. So do you have a photo? Do you have an interesting headline? So your headline doesn't necessarily need to be your job title, because that's going to be down in your experience, right? I'm looking for something like catchy. And then I do a quick skim. Is your Salesforce experience your current job, or was that 10 years ago? It's 10 years ago, probably move on. Jump down to the certifications and awards and stuff, and I look for certified Salesforce, whatever, or super badge from Trailhead, whatever, right? And then I look at languages, and if I can find somebody who's got something more than English, even better. So for me, it's a very manual process to go through and find good candidates, but never underestimate your LinkedIn profile. Put enough there to pique the person's interest, but if you put too much there, depending on what job you're looking for, I'm going to lose interest because there's just too much reading, and then I move on, right? So just it's been really interesting trying to hire, very competitive. So whatever you can do to kind of just make yourself stand out a bit. And it's funny, this one person who applied on her resume, I think it's even on her LinkedIn profile, she had one comment that caught my eye. And it was, I believe nachos should be layered. So I'm like, you know what? I totally agree. So, I messaged her in LinkedIn. This was a year ago. We still chat. We're still waiting for the right opportunity to bring her on board. But she stood out. She stood out. She has a personality. She's got a sense of humor. So I'm like, I want to talk to this person. Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox now.
Okay, thank you. I think we're running out of time. Is there anything else, Maurizio, before we get off? We're fine. Okay, thank you. Thank you very, very much. I do have a story, but I'm going to hold my story about LinkedIn and Maurizio to the end. If I have time, I'll tell it. If not, then I won't tell it. But anyways,
Stop recording, Kevin, then you restart next session.
Okay, you want to do it that way? Sure. Okay, just stop it.